What if the way you think about aging actually changes how your body ages, right? Not metaphorically, not motivationally, biologically. What if simply believing that aging equals weakness, decline, forgetfulness, frailty, irrelevance? Maybe what if all that slowly pushes the body in that direction? And what if the opposite was also true, right? What if people who view aging as a period of growth and strength and wisdom and purpose and capability actually age differently? Well, today we're talking about something that sounds almost psychological on the surface, right? But has very real physiological consequences. We're diving into the science of aging beliefs, the stereotype embodiment theory, why lower body strength may be one of the most important biomarkers of longevity, how strength training impacts the brain, and in today's Peptide Spotlight, we're discussing one of the most fascinating longevity peptides ever studied, Epithelon. It's a peptide that's connected to melatonin regulation, telomeres, aging biology, and longevity research that originated in Russia decades ago. And so this is one of those episodes where psychology, physiology, neuroscience, and longevity all collide, right? And honestly, it might completely change the way you think about aging. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Longevity Game podcast, where we don't just talk about living longer, we talk about living stronger, sharper, more resilient, and more capable for as long as possible. I'm Michael Ward, founder of Next Level TRT, and we're longevity and performance medicine based right out of Fort Worth, Texas. And today we're diving into a topic that I think many people underestimate. All right, the relationship between mindset and biological aging. Because aging, it doesn't help. It's just not only happening to your cells, right? It's also happening in your beliefs. And I just got finished working out, so I'm just trying to catch my breath. And so bear with me. I got a late workout in today. So, and later in this episode, we're also going to be talking about a concept that we're going to connect with a concept that one of the strongest predictors of healthy aging, right? And that's lower body strength, which is super important. And we'll talk about that. And then we'll finish the day with a peptide spotlight. Like I said, we're going to talk about Epithelon. And man, Epithelon, golly, it's a cool peptide. I don't think I've talked about it here before. I have some patients who are on it, and they love it, And so we'll talk about that. It's generated just enormous curiosity in longevity and anti-aging circles for years. All right, so let's dive in. Let me ask you something. What comes to mind when you hear the word aging, right? For many people, it's weakness, fatigue, maybe frailty, memory decline, slower movement, disease, maybe irrelevance, right? And here's the problem, most people don't realize how deeply these beliefs become internalized over time, because we hear them constantly. You're too old for that, or wait until you hit your 40s, or everything goes downhill after 50s, or that's just part of getting older. Even eventually people stop questioning these statements and they absorb them. That brings us to something called the Stereotype Embodiment Theory, right? And this theory was developed by the psychologist Dr. Becca Levy, and she's from Yale. And the idea is incredibly powerful, right? And it's not mystical, okay? So some of the things that I'm going to tell you about, it sounds kind of like pseudoscience, but it's not pseudoscience, right? It's really, really interesting, and it's true. It's really cool. The theory suggests that age stereotypes absorbed across the lifespan eventually become internalized and influence your health, your cognition, physical function, and even longevity itself. And so, in other words, the beliefs we absorb about aging may actually shape how we age. That's wild, right? So, let's break it down. So, imagine two people in their 60s, right? And one person, or we'll just say person number one, right? Person number one, they believe that, aging means decline and weakness is inevitable, right? Exercise is dangerous, memory loss is unavoidable, and maybe their best years are behind them, you know. And then you have another person, person number two. In person number two, they believe that aging can still involve growth, right? Strength can be improved. The brain can remain capable, right? Physical activity matters. Purpose still matters. Learning still matters, right? And here's the fascinating part. Research suggests that these beliefs, they're not psychologically neutral. They do affect things, right? They affect the stress physiology. They affect your cardiovascular response, your recovery. They affect memory performance, physical activity levels, right? Health behaviors. And over time, those differences compound. And one of the most famous findings from Dr. Levy's work showed that, individuals with more positive perceptions of aging lived significantly longer than those with more negative perceptions. All right. Did you hear that? Let me say that one more time. People with more positive perceptions of aging lived longer, significantly longer than people with negative perceptions of aging. That's super, super important. I hope if you don't get anything else from this whole episode, I want you to get that part right there. Okay. They're not doing that. It's not because magic. How can I put this? They're not magically avoiding aging, right? But beliefs influence behaviors. They influence stress responses, resilience. They they significantly impact physiology, and so that's the thing. And here's a strong point here. The brain, your brain, is constantly listening to the stories you tell yourself about your body, and you reinforce those beliefs whenever you think one way or the other, right? And so if you constantly reinforce decline, the body is going to follow. It's kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And sometimes, I'll talk to my patients and I'll say, just imagine, if you didn't know how old you were, right? Imagine that you never knew your birthday, you never knew the year you were born. Then you couldn't be anchored to that age. And you couldn't let all those things that you hear about that age affect you because you don't even know how old you are, right? You just go with it, right? Now that's cool. So, I mean, it's easier said than done, right? Especially if you're at some point in your life right now where maybe you have seen physical decline. Maybe you aren't very active. Maybe you have told yourself over and over again, oh, I'm getting older, can't do those things anymore. That's a lie you're telling yourself. I mean, some people do have physical incapabilities, right? But for the most part, you can do much more than you give yourself credit for. And so that's really, really important, right? This doesn't just affect motivation, it affects neurobiology, right? And so people with more positive attitudes toward aging, they often demonstrate better recovery from stress, better memory performance. They have greater physical activity, better cardiovascular outcomes. And one reason may be that negative beliefs create chronic, like psychological stress, right? And then chronic stress, it can accelerate aging biology. Stress can raise cortisol, right? It causes more inflammation, poor sleep. It can cause less movement, more social withdrawal. It becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. And this is why mindset really matters in longevity medicine. I mean, let me be clear, right? This is not saying that just because you think positive that you'll never age, right? That's not that's mystical. That's mysticism, right? Biology matters, right? Genetics matter, nutrition matters, exercise matters, right? but mindset influences whether people engage in those behaviors that support healthy aging. Does that make sense? And um, it also influences how the nervous system responds to stress. And that matters, right? I hope that makes sense. And this is like the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about in this episode, because I see it all the time, and I talk to people all the time. I worked in the ICU for years, and people at the end of their life, they're there laying in the ICU, and they're past the point where, most of them are past the point where they can get up and start exercising or lifting weights and doing all those things, and they'd give anything to go back and make some changes. So right now, you don't have to work out, right? You get to work out. Okay, remember that. You don't have to work out. You get to work out. And so take advantage, because you can have a much longer, higher quality of life if you'll just do that. And you don't have to brutalize yourself, right? I say this all the time. You don't have to just go to the gym every day. You don't have to go to the gym at all. You can do things at home that will help preserve your body and help to slow down decline from aging here now, right? All right, which this is a good segue into the next segment here. We're going to talk about lower body strength and longevity, right? Let me get a little drink here. All right, lower body strength. Oh my gosh! So if there's one physical characteristic that's strongly associated with independence later in life, it's leg strength, guys. Holy moly. It is so important. Dudes, guys, don't skip leg day. It's super important. And honestly, this is one of the reasons I encourage patients to stop thinking about exercise as just like a cosmetics, right? Or aesthetics, right? It's not just to look good. You do look good if you work out, right? Most likely you will have a really nice physique. And if you don't, eventually you will, right? But, strength is survival, especially lower body strength, right? Your legs are your mobility, right? Your balance, your stability, your independence, your confidence, and really your metabolic engine. Loss of lower body strength, my gosh, is strongly associated with falls and frailty and disability and hospitalization and loss of dependence. It's strongly related to mortality risk, and once mobility declines, everything tends to decline, right? And so people move less, they isolate more, muscle loss then accelerates, your metabolic health worsens, cognitive decline, my gosh, the cognitive decline risk rises like crazy, right? Mobility is deeply tied to longevity. Okay. And so that's super important. All right, guys, lower body strength. You got to have it. And this really gets more interesting here, actually. Lower body strength doesn't just affect your mobility, right? Although it greatly affects that. It appears to be connected to brain health. There is some research, and I think I've talked about this before. There's some research that suggests associations between leg strength and cognitive aging, right? I'm sure you're asking why, right? Why is that? Well, because exercise, especially like resistance training, and movement, it affects things like blood flow. It affects neuroplasticity, insulin sensitivity, inflammation. It helps stimulate BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotropic factor. It helps to enhance mitochondrial health. And your legs contain some of the largest muscles in your entire body. And when you train them properly, they become a powerful endocrine and metabolic organ, right? And so, movement stimulates the brain. And so sedentary people, or sedentary behavior can accelerate decline. And so getting up, moving around, it's just so important. It's so important. One of the saddest things we see in aging populations is this: people stop moving because they feel old, but then lack of movement accelerates aging even further, right? So movement preserves cognition, strength preserves independence, and leg strength preserves freedom. And who doesn't want that? I always ask my patients, like, imagine when you retire, let's just say you retire at 65, right? And you have all these things planned. When you no longer have to work for a living, and you want to live life, right? The golden years, right? Think about all those incredibly fun and adventurous things that you want to do once you retire. You got to have strength to do those things. And let me tell you, you start losing a lot of strength after your 50s because physiologically, we just we have some hormonal shifts and things just don't. You're not making growth hormone like you used to. You're not making testosterone like you used to. And you don't have the mitochondrial health that you used to, and things can get harder as you age, but you can push back on those things, and there's plenty of tools in the toolbox to allow you to do that. But most of all, you have to be willing, and you have to get out of your head about, oh, I'm getting old, I can't do those things anymore, right? And so let's make this practical, right? So how do we do this? Well, let's talk about application. If someone wants to age well, what should they focus on? I'll tell you 4 or 5 things. All right. First, and the most important, in my opinion, this is the most important thing. This is the most important longevity lever, and that is preserving muscle, right? Especially lower body muscle, like I just said. You want to do squats, and you don't have to do squats with weight. You can do body squats, right? You can hold a gallon of milk or a gallon of water and just do squats like that. Hold on to a chair if you're, just getting into this, and then just use the chair as support and just do squats. Leg presses, leg presses are awesome. They really, really help. Lunges, where you kind of just take a step and then you almost like a one-legged squat. And then step ups, where you step up on maybe a stool. Maybe you have a stool at home, or like here at my house, we have these little 2 to 3 step stools. If you have something like that, just step up on that and step down, step up, step down. And you just do that, do 3 sets of 20 of those, deadlifts. Deadlifts are whenever you have something heavy in your hand and you bend down, keep your back straight, keep your legs straight and bend down, and you'll feel your hamstrings pull a little bit. And that's because you're activating your hamstrings, and you're also activating your lower back. And those things will strengthen your legs and your lower back, right? Maybe walking inclines, walking up hills. If you can get on a treadmill, set the incline to like 5 and then just walk. You're going to activate all those muscles in your legs. Stair climbing. A lot of people don't like stair climbing, but actually today I was on the stair mail for 25 minutes, which is really not a long time for me. When I'm in competition prep, I'm sometimes in the stairs up to 70 minutes at a time. And it gets brutal. But man, I mean, it really works those legs, and it also helps build cardiovascular fitness because you're burning calories, your heart rate's getting up there, and so it's really good. You don't have to be a power lifter, and you don't have to brutalize yourself, but you do need strength, and those things will help, right? Number 2, train for balance and stability, right? And I have to say, falls become incredibly dangerous in life, right? Balance training, it matters so much. I mean, let's just say that you're not training for balance and agility, or stability, and you're walking off a street curb and you lose your balance. You can fall, bust your face open, bust your nose, you can break a hip. I mean, and then if you break a hip, it's all downhill from there. I mean, it gets really tough, and so balance and stability, got to do that. Number 3, and I say this all the time, my gosh, prioritize protein. My patients, they know how strong I feel about prioritizing protein. I even have a protein corner in my clinic, and I load it full of protein snacks, high protein snacks. And I always tell people, grab some protein on your way out, because I want you to, at least, if you're not going to get a lot of protein, outside the clinic, you're going to leave with at least 30 grams of protein before you walk out the door, So protein, muscle preservation, it requires amino acids, right? But you can, you also have to do the work. right? Some kind of something to stress the body to build muscle. You also have to have those amino acids to build that muscle, right? Especially with aging, or age-related anabolic resistance. That's something that as you age, you have more anabolic resistance. Like I said, you're not making some things hormonally, or you're having hormonal decline that really affects your body's anabolic aging. And so, and that's called anabolic resistance. Okay. And then next is continue moving. You got to continue moving. The body adapts to demand, right? So stop demanding movement. The body stops prioritizing it, right? You have to move. You have to get up and move around. People that sit in their chair, after, let's just say you retire and you decide, well, now I'm going to take it easy. Most people, they choose to sit, more, do more lounging. They decline so rapidly. It's so important to get up and move around. Just go for walks. If nothing else, go get up and go for walks. That's at least something that's going to get you moving. So also number 5, don't psychologically retire early, right? This is really huge, right? Some people mentally age decades before their body does, right? And this goes back to that stereotype embodiment theory. They keep telling themselves, well, I'm older now, it's time to settle it down. That's so silly. That is so silly. They stop learning, they stop challenging themselves, they stop training, and then they stop adapting, right? And that accelerates decline. It's huge, guys. It's huge. So let's shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about the peptide spotlight. Every week, we do a spotlight on a particular peptide. And so if this is your first episode that you're listening to, check back some of the other episodes. We have some really cool peptide spotlights, and a lot of people are new to the peptide arena, right? And so what are peptides? Let's talk about that really quick for people who are new to this. Peptides are really just sequences of amino acids, right, that are arranged in a way to tell our body to do something that it already does, except it doesn't do it as efficiently maybe later on in life, and so peptides are signals or blueprints that tell our body to do something, and in our body we have thousands and thousands of peptides that our bodies assemble to carry out physical reactions, chemical reactions. And so whenever we take a peptide or inject a peptide or consume a peptide, we're basically just taking something that we already make, but we're taking it in excess. And so we're stimulating a response, and so, today's peptide spotlight is on a really cool peptide. And you heard it at the beginning. It's called Epithelon. And so Epithelon is probably one of the most famous longevity peptides discussed in anti-aging circles, right? And the story is really fascinating. Okay, so let's go way back. So Epithelon originated from research from a professor in Russia, and his name was Vladimir Kavinson. And he and his colleagues researched Epithelon. And there's a lot of stuff out there for it, So these researchers became interested in short peptides, and specifically ones that are derived from the pineal gland, right? And the pineal gland is a small little gland right around your pituitary gland, right back there by your, around your hypothalamus and pituitary gland. And it's deeply connected to circadian rhythms, melatonin regulation, your sleep-wake regulation, and potentially broader neuroendocrine signaling tied to aging. And so Epithelon, and you also may have heard it called like Epithelon, but it's Epithalon. Or Epithalon, Epithelon or Epithelon. And it's a synthetic tetrapeptide, meaning that it's only made from 4 amino acids. That's it, right? And so Epithelon gained a lot of attention because early research suggested some potential effects involving melatonin regulation, oxidative stress, cellular aging, and even telomerase activation. And so let's talk about that for a second. So telomeres are protective caps at the end of your chromosomes. Think of them as those, on your shoelaces, how you have those little plastic caps at the end that keep your shoelaces from fraying, and if they pop off, you can never put that sucker back through the hole in your shoe. Yeah, it becomes a mess, right? Well, telomeres are those protective caps at the end of your DNA, at the end of your chromosomes, right? And over time, they tend to shorten as cells divide, right? And so shortened telomeres are associated with cellular aging. And so now telomerase is the enzyme that helps maintain telomere length, right? And some early Epithelon studies suggested that the peptide might increase telomerase activity in certain cell models, causing elongation of those telomeres, right? Showing that it actually pushes back on aging. And so that really, really got their attention, right? Especially in the longevity world. People are paying attention, right? Because researchers started asking, could this peptide influence cellular aging pathways? So pretty cool peptide. But let's get back to reality for a second, though. Now, so we have to keep this balanced and evidence based. Okay, most of the excitement around Epithelon, it comes from animal studies, right, and cellular models, right, and Russian longevity research, long time ago, right. These are theoretical mechanisms, okay, and so we don't have any massive, like, large scale long term human trials, right, that show that Epithelon dramatically increases human lifespan, right? That distinction matters. And so just make sure that you're getting that piece, because this is where the internet can get ahead of science, There's a lot of bro speak out there. And so, you got to look at the research and just take that for what it is, and don't let people kind of blow that up into something that actually happens. I mean, people are interested in longevity, right? And those people that are interested in longevity also, they often use Epithelon because of the theoretical potential involving improved sleep quality, right? Improve circadian rhythm support, and healthy aging pathways, and oxidative stress reduction, and neuroendocrine support, and some people that take it also report improved sleep, right? Better recovery, better perceived, just feeling better, better perceived well-being, but again, anecdotes are not the same as clinical proof. And so, I mean, I have to say, even in my practice, I mean, I see and talk to people who have experienced things since being on Epithelon that sound really, really cool. And so, my perspective is this, right? Epithelon is significant. It's really, really fascinating, right? It's super fascinating. Its mechanisms, incredibly interesting. Okay. Even the origin story itself is really, really cool, but in its relationship to telomerase research, it's generated enormous curiosity, right? But we have to avoid presenting it as some magical anti-aging cure. Okay. Longevity medicine is rarely one thing, it's the accumulation of things, like sleep and muscle preservation and metabolic health and hormonal health, and cardiovascular fitness, nutrition and stress management, and recovery, and purpose and movement, all the things that we've talked about, right? Peptides may eventually become super important supportive tools, which, I believe that a lot of them are. But they should never really distract you from those foundational principles, of aging. Okay. And so, guys, that's about it. I don't like going over 30 minutes, and right now we're at 29. So let's bring this all together. All right. Your beliefs about aging matter. All right. Your movement matters. Your strength matters. Your mindset matters. And your ability to continue adapting, it matters. All right. So the people who age best are the people who, they're not obsessing over every little wrinkle. They're the people who remain engaged in life, right? They're the people who continue learning and continue moving and continue adapting, and continuing to challenge themselves, because aging isn't just, simply the passage of time, right? Aging is the gradual loss of resilience. Okay. And the goal of longevity medicine is not immortality, right? It's preserving resilience for as long as possible, physically, mentally, emotionally, metabolically, and that's it. That's the longevity game, right? And so that will wrap up this episode, guys. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with somebody that needs to hear that aging does not automatically mean decline. And if you're listening on Spotify, answer this week's poll. The question is, what do you believe has the biggest impact on healthy aging? Is it mindset and attitude, strength and movement, nutrition and metabolism, or sleep and recovery? If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover here, just let us know. And remember, this podcast exists to educate, not sell, except selling you on the ideas of the things I just talked about. I'll see you on the next episode of the Longevity Game podcast. Thank you for joining me today. Stay intentional, stay informed, and as always, go long. If you have any questions, business inquiries, and you'd like to sponsor an episode, or if you just like to be a guest on the show, send us an email. For questions or concerns about a topic or a particular episode, hit us up at hello@thelongevitygamepodcast.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, email us at beaguest@thelongevitygame.podcast.com. And if you're interested in supporting or sponsoring the show, send us a message at supports. No, I'm sorry. I'm wrong with this. Send us a message at sponsors@thelongevitygamepodcast.com. And guys, that is it for me today. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time on the Longevity Game Podcast.